Hello, everyone. We've all been there, haven't we? Stuck in that loop of excuses, procrastination, and self doubt. It's like we're fighting an invisible force that keeps us glued to the couch or scrolling endlessly on our phones. But here's the truth: laziness isn't who you are, it's just a thought, a fleeting impulse. And you can kill it. Yes, you can. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. Today, I'm going to show you how to break free from lazy thoughts and step into the action-driven, unstoppable version of yourself. Let's go. Laziness is just a habit, not your identity. Too often we label ourselves as lazy, like it's a fixed part of who we are. But here's the truth: laziness is not your identity. It's a learned behavior, a habit that develops over time. Think about it. No one is born lazy. As kids, we're naturally curious and active, constantly moving, exploring, and trying new things. Laziness isn't part of our DNA. It's a byproduct of the patterns we've fallen into over the years. Maybe it started with avoiding a chore or procrastinating on a task because it felt uncomfortable or overwhelming. Over time, these little moments of avoidance stack up, and your brain learns to associate inactivity with comfort. The more you reinforce that loop, avoiding effort, feeling relieved, and avoiding again, the more it becomes automatic. What we call laziness is often just a coping mechanism for discomfort, fear of failure, or lack of clarity. But here's what's important: habits are not permanent, they're not set in stone, and they don't define you. They're simply routines your brain has built to conserve energy or avoid perceived pain. And the beauty of habits is that they can be changed. Once you understand that laziness is a learned behavior rather than a core part of who you are, you can start breaking it down and replacing it with action-oriented habits that serve you better. By reframing laziness as a temporary, surface-level habit rather than a deep, unchangeable trait, you remove its power. It's not you that's lazy, it's the behavior you've been practicing. And anything you've practiced can be unlearned. Action beats motivation every time. Many of us fall into the trap of waiting for motivation before we take action. We tell ourselves, I'll start when I feel ready, or I just need to get inspired. But the reality is, motivation is fleeting and unreliable. It's like a spark. It might ignite for a moment, but it rarely lasts long enough to sustain meaningful change. If you rely solely on motivation to get things done, you'll spend most of your time waiting instead of doing. Action, on the other hand, is where the real power lies. When you take action, even a small step, you initiate momentum. That momentum generates progress, and progress is what fuels a deeper, more lasting sense of motivation. It's a cycle that works in reverse. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. Think about the times you didn't feel like going to the gym or tackling a big project, but you pushed yourself to start anyway. Within minutes of getting into the flow, the resistance faded, and suddenly it wasn't so hard to keep going. That's the magic of action. It overrides hesitation and silences the inner critic that tells you to stop. The problem with relying on motivation is that it's tied to your emotions. On days when you feel tired, discouraged, or overwhelmed, motivation is the first thing to disappear. But action doesn't care how you feel. It's a choice you make independent of your mood. It's about showing up even when you don't want to, because you understand that the act of starting is what makes everything else easier. Small actions are especially powerful. You don't need to conquer an entire task at once. You just need to take the first step. Write one sentence. Do 5 minutes of exercise. Send that one email. These small wins build confidence and break the cycle of inertia. When you act, you're sending a signal to your brain, I'm capable of this. That signal creates a ripple effect, making it easier to take the next step and the one after that. Moreover, action creates clarity. Many times we feel stuck or unmotivated because we're unsure of where to start or overwhelmed by the scope of what needs to be done. But once you take action, the path forward becomes clearer. The act of doing allows you to course correct, refine your approach, and learn as you go. It eliminates the mental clutter and hesitation that come from overthinking. Um, mm, Interrupt the lazy loop. Laziness isn't just a lack of effort. It's a loop, a mental cycle that repeats itself over and over. You feel an urge to rest or procrastinate, you give in to that feeling, and then you justify the inaction with excuses like, I deserve a break, or I'll get to it later. This loop is comfortable because it allows you to avoid discomfort and effort, but it also traps you. The more you stay in this pattern, the harder it becomes to break free. Interrupting the lazy loop is about recognizing this cycle as it's happening and breaking it before it gains momentum. The key to interruption is immediacy. The moment you catch yourself sinking into lazy thoughts, whether it's reaching for your phone, convincing yourself to stay in bed a little longer, or pushing a task to tomorrow, you have to act instantly. This is not the time for negotiation with yourself. The longer you let those lazy thoughts linger, the more power they gain, and the harder it becomes to override them. So, by acting quickly, you can short circuit the loop before it takes hold. One powerful way to interrupt the lazy loop is to use a physical trigger. Get up, clap your hands, splash cold water on your face, or even do a quick stretch. These physical actions jolt your brain out of autopilot and force you into the present moment. The simple act of standing up from the couch or moving to another room can shift your mental state and create a sense of momentum. Another method is to use countdowns or timers. For instance, the moment you feel yourself procrastinating, count down from 5 and then move. This technique works because it gives your brain a brief moment to focus on the countdown instead of spiraling into excuses. When the countdown ends, your next step is clear. Take action. Disrupting the loop can also be psychological. Ask yourself, what am I avoiding right now? Often, laziness is a disguise for something deeper. Fear of failure, feeling overwhelmed, or a lack of direction. Naming the root cause can take away its power. Once you understand what you're avoiding, you can address it directly by breaking the task into smaller, more manageable pieces or focusing on just the first step. It's also helpful to reframe your thinking in the moment. Instead of focusing on how difficult or unpleasant a task might feel, remind yourself of the benefit on the other side. Visualize the satisfaction of completing the task, the relief of crossing it off your list, or the progress you'll make toward your goals. Shifting your focus to the outcome can make it easier to take that initial action. Ultimately, interrupting the lazy loop is about awareness and action. It's a skill that gets stronger the more you practice it. Each time you successfully break the cycle, you're teaching your brain that you're in control, not your lazy thoughts. Get specific and commit. One of the biggest reasons people fail to break free from laziness is because their goals are too vague. Saying things like, I need to exercise more, or I should work on that project, sounds good in theory, but it lacks the clarity and focus needed to drive action. Vague intentions leave too much room for hesitation, overthinking, and excuses. The more general your goals are, the easier it is to push them aside because there's no clear starting point or structure. That's why specificity is critical. It removes ambiguity and gives your brain a precise target to focus on. When you're specific, you eliminate the guesswork. For example, instead of saying, I'll clean the house this weekend, say, at 10 a.m. on Saturday, I'll clean the kitchen for 30 minutes. Instead of, I need to get healthier, say, I'll drink a glass of water as soon as I wake up and walk for 10 minutes after lunch. These concrete, measurable actions give you a clear roadmap. They also make the task feel more manageable because you're focusing on one piece at a time rather than an overwhelming, undefined goal. Being specific doesn't just help with clarity, it also helps with accountability. When you set a clear intention with a defined time and place, you're far more likely to follow through. Research shows that people who plan the when, where, and how of their actions are significantly more successful at achieving their goals. This is because you're creating a mental contract with yourself, one that's harder to break than a loose promise like, I'll do it later. Getting specific is only half the battle. Once you've defined your action, you need to commit to it fully. Commitment means treating your plan like a non-negotiable appointment. Think about it. If you had a meeting scheduled with your boss or a friend, you'd show up, right? You wouldn't cancel last minute because you didn't feel like it. The same level of respect and dedication should apply to the commitments you make to yourself. To solidify your commitment, you can use tools like reminders, alarms, or visual cues. For instance, if your goal is to work out in the morning, lay out your workout clothes the night before where you can see them. If your goal is to write, set up your notebook or computer in advance. These small cues serve as triggers, making it easier to start when the time comes. Another powerful way to reinforce commitment is to share your plan with someone else. Tell a friend, family member, or coworker what you intend to do and when you'll do it. This external accountability adds a layer of pressure to follow through, as you'll be less likely to let someone else down. Finally, understand that commitment isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up consistently, even when it's inconvenient or difficult. There will be days when you don't feel like following through, but those are the moments when commitment matters most. By honoring your plan despite your feelings, you're building resilience and proving to yourself that you can be trusted to keep your word. This sense of trust is essential for long-term change, as it shifts your identity from someone who avoids action to someone who follows through.
Win the next 5 minutes. When faced with a daunting task or a long to-do list, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. You start thinking about everything that needs to get done, and before you know it, you're paralyzed by the sheer size of the challenge. That's where the concept of winning the next 5 minutes comes in. It's a simple yet powerful strategy that shifts your focus from the big picture, which can feel intimidating, to a manageable chunk of time that you can control. The idea is straightforward. Instead of worrying about the entire day or the entire task, ask yourself, what can I do in the next 5 minutes to move forward? By narrowing your focus to this small window, you strip away the pressure of perfection and long-term planning. 5 minutes is short enough to feel achievable, but long enough to make progress. This approach eliminates excuses and helps you get started, which is often the hardest part. Winning the next 5 minutes is especially effective because it leverages the power of momentum. When you start small, you create a sense of accomplishment that propels you into the next action. For example, if you're struggling to start a workout, commit to just 5 minutes. Once you begin moving, you're likely to continue because you've already overcome the initial resistance. The same principle applies to tasks like cleaning, studying, or working on a project. Starting with a 5-minute focus removes the mental barrier of, I don't have the energy or time for this, because almost anyone can spare 5 minutes. This strategy also helps reframe your relationship with productivity. Often we think of productivity in terms of grand achievements or lengthy sessions of focus, but the truth is, meaningful progress is built in small increments. Every 5 minutes you win adds up. It's not about doing everything perfectly or all at once. It's about consistently taking small, intentional steps. To make the most of this approach, it's helpful to have a specific action in mind. For instance, instead of saying, I'll work for the next 5 minutes, break it down further. I'll write the first paragraph of this email, or I'll fold 5 pieces of laundry. The more specific and actionable your focus, the easier it is to dive in without overthinking. Another benefit of focusing on just 5 minutes is that it disrupts the cycle of procrastination. When you're procrastinating, your brain often amplifies the difficulty or length of a task, making it feel insurmountable. But when you shrink the time frame to 5 minutes, you strip away the overwhelm and allow yourself to start without commitment to anything beyond that short interval. Even if you don't finish the entire task, you've still made progress, and that progress builds confidence and momentum for the next step. Winning the next 5 minutes also shifts your mindset from passivity to agency. When you focus on a small, immediate action, you take control of the present moment. Instead of feeling stuck or powerless, you're actively choosing to move forward, no matter how small the step. This sense of control is empowering and helps build the habit of taking initiative, even in the face of challenges or distractions. This approach is versatile and can be applied to any situation. Whether you're trying to tackle a major project, get out of bed in the morning, or overcome a moment of laziness, the question remains the same. What can I do right now in the next 5 minutes to win this moment? By breaking your day into these small, winnable segments, you create a rhythm of consistent progress that keeps you moving forward, even on the toughest days. Celebrate progress, not perfection. One of the biggest traps people fall into when trying to overcome laziness or achieve their goals is the obsession with perfection. They feel that if they can't do something perfectly, it's not worth doing at all. This mindset is toxic because it sets an impossibly high standard, making it easier to procrastinate, give up, or never even start. But here's the truth. Progress, not perfection, is what drives real change. When you focus on progress, you shift your energy toward what you've accomplished instead of fixating on what's still left to do or what didn't go exactly as planned. Celebrating progress is about acknowledging the small wins and recognizing that every step forward, no matter how tiny, is a victory. It's about understanding that success is a series of small, consistent actions that build on each other over time. For example, if your goal is to exercise regularly, one workout is progress. It doesn't matter if you worked out for 10 minutes instead of an hour, or if your form wasn't perfect. What matters is that you showed up and took action. That's worth celebrating because it's evidence that you're moving in the right direction. When you focus on perfection, you often overlook the value of incremental improvements. You might beat yourself up for not finishing a task completely or for making mistakes along the way. This self-criticism can be paralyzing, leading to a cycle of avoidance and inaction. On the other hand, celebrating progress reinforces positive behavior and builds momentum. It creates a feedback loop where each small achievement motivates you to keep going, even when the journey is challenging. This mindset also helps you build resilience. Progress often involves setbacks, mistakes, and learning curves. When you celebrate your effort and growth rather than just the outcome, you develop the mental toughness to persevere. For instance, if you're learning a new skill, the fact that you practiced today, even if it didn't go perfectly, is something to be proud of. It's a reminder that you're committed to the process, which is far more important than any single result. Celebrating progress doesn't have to be elaborate. It can be as simple as taking a moment to reflect on what you've achieved, no matter how small. Write it down in a journal, share it with a friend, or give yourself a mental pat on the back. Small rewards can also be effective, like enjoying a cup of coffee after completing a task, or taking a short break to relax. These acknowledgments reinforce the idea that effort and consistency are valuable and worth recognizing. One of the most powerful aspects of celebrating progress is that it shifts your focus from what you lack to what you've gained. This change in perspective is crucial for building confidence and self-efficacy. Instead of dwelling on how far you still have to go, you start to see how far you've already come. This sense of accomplishment fuels your motivation and helps you stay committed to your goals. Another benefit of focusing on progress is that it encourages a growth mindset. A growth mindset emphasizes learning, improvement, and adaptability over fixed outcomes. When you celebrate progress, you're embracing the idea that effort and practice lead to growth, even if the results aren't immediate. This mindset makes it easier to take risks, try new things, and step out of your comfort zone because you're not afraid of falling short. Progress, by its nature, is imperfect. It's messy, uneven, and sometimes slow, but it's also what moves you forward. When you celebrate progress, you're giving yourself permission to be human, to learn, to adapt, and to grow at your own pace. You're acknowledging that every small step matters, and that those steps, when added together, lead to meaningful change. Skills are gifts. that scare us and fearfully lead to meaningful change. Visualize the consequences of inaction. When faced with a choice between taking action and staying in your comfort zone, it's easy to downplay the impact of doing nothing. The human brain is wired to focus on immediate comfort and gratification, so we tend to dismiss the long-term consequences of inaction. However, those consequences are real, and they often accumulate in ways that can significantly affect your life over time. Visualizing the consequences of inaction is a powerful tool to break through laziness because it forces you to confront the reality of what happens when you choose to stay stagnant. Start by imagining your life a year from now if you continue on your current path without making any changes. What will your health look like if you keep skipping workouts or eating poorly? How will your career progress if you keep putting off important tasks or avoiding professional growth opportunities? How will your relationships evolve if you continue to neglect meaningful connections? What is the prospect of finding a lover if you continue to neglect meaningful connections? By projecting yourself into the future and picturing the negative outcomes of inaction, you create a sense of urgency and responsibility to act. The key to this exercise is to be honest and vivid in your visualization. Don't sugarcoat the potential consequences. For instance, if you're avoiding addressing your finances, imagine the stress of mounting debt, the opportunities you might miss because of poor credit, and the limits it could place on your life. If you're delaying pursuing a passion or dream, envision the regret of looking back years later and realizing you never even tried. These images can be uncomfortable, but that discomfort is precisely what makes this technique effective. It jolts you out of complacency and makes the cost of inaction undeniable. At the same time, it's important to recognize that inaction often carries hidden consequences. It's not just about the big, obvious losses, like missing a deadline or failing to achieve a goal. Inaction also eats away at your confidence, self-esteem, and sense of purpose. Every time you avoid a challenge or delay a responsibility, you reinforce a habit of avoidance. This creates a downward spiral where procrastination and laziness become more ingrained, making it even harder to take action in the future. Visualizing this erosion of self-belief can be a powerful motivator to change course. Beyond the personal consequences, think about how your inaction might affect others. If you're a parent, what message are you sending to your children by not pursuing your goals or taking care of your health? If you're part of a team at work, how might your procrastination impact your colleagues or the overall success of a project? Visualizing the ripple effects of your choices can help you see the broader implications of staying inactive and inspire you to take responsibility not just for yourself, but for those who depend on you. Another aspect to consider is the opportunity cost of inaction. Every time you choose not to act, you're not just staying in place. You're missing out on what could have been. Imagine the skills you could have developed, the relationships you could have strengthened, or the milestones you could have reached if you had started taking small, consistent steps. Visualizing these missed opportunities can be a powerful reminder that time is a finite resource, and every moment spent avoiding action is a moment you can't get back. To make this practice even more effective, contrast the consequences of inaction with the potential benefits of taking action. For example, if you're hesitant to start exercising, visualize not only the toll of continued inactivity on your body, but also the strength energy, and confidence you'll gain by committing to a routine. This comparison helps you see that while taking action might be uncomfortable in the short term, the rewards far outweigh the effort, and the cost of doing nothing is far too high. Visualizing the consequences of inaction isn't about scaring yourself into action. It's about creating clarity. It's about breaking through the fog of excuses and denial that often accompany laziness and forcing yourself to confront reality. When you see the bigger picture of what's at stake, both for yourself and those around you, it becomes much harder to justify staying stuck.